Mongolia doesn't feel crowded. It feels endless. An ocean of grasslands beneath giant skies. Lonely roads disappearing into the horizon. Ancient horse riders crossing valleys untouched for centuries. And landscapes so vast, they make the rest of the world feel small. Most places you visit leave you with memories. Mongolia leaves you with a feeling. Something harder to name. Something that sits with you longer than photographs do. Some places feel modern. Mongolia feels timeless. And once you experience that silence, it stays with you. Hidden between Russia and China lies one of the last truly wild countries on Earth, a place of endless steppes, deserts that sing in the wind, frozen mountains, and nomadic traditions still deeply connected to the land. A country where the population is small and the land is enormous, where the space between things is part of the experience, where nature hasn't been pushed to the edges, it is the center of everything. If you love discovering extraordinary places, subscribe. There's much more ahead. The Great Steppe. The first thing that shocks most travelers about Mongolia is the scale. Grasslands stretching beyond the horizon. No fences, no crowds, no cities for miles. Just open land beneath enormous skies. And then the realization settles in that this isn't a park. This isn't a protected reserve with edges and entry points. This is just the country. This is what most of Mongolia actually looks like. In many places, you can drive for hours without seeing another road, without passing a petrol station, without a signal on your phone, without any sign that the modern world exists at all. And that isolation changes how the country feels. It changes how you feel inside it. Mongolia doesn't feel controlled. It feels free. In a way that's difficult to describe to someone who hasn't stood inside it. The kind of freedom that comes not from doing something, but from being somewhere that asks nothing of you. And standing alone in the middle of the steppe, you begin to understand why nomadic life survived here for thousands of years. Not because there was no other option, but because this land in this scale produces a kind of life that fits it. A life that moves with the seasons instead of fighting them. But Mongolia becomes even more extraordinary at sunset. Nomadic life and ger camps. Across the grasslands sit traditional gers. Round white homes built to move with the seasons. Smoke rising into cold morning air. Horses grazing beside distant mountains. And nights so quiet, you hear almost nothing except wind. The ger is not just a shelter. It's a system, built to be dismantled and moved. Built to hold warmth in temperatures that drop well below freezing. Built to face a specific direction, organized in a specific way, for reasons passed down through generations. Everything inside has a purpose. Nothing is wasted. And that efficiency carries through into the whole way of life. Staying with nomadic families changes the way many travelers see the world. Life moves slower here, simpler, more connected to nature. The rhythm of the day follows the animals, the weather, and the light. Not a schedule, not a screen, not the noise of somewhere else demanding attention. And under Mongolia's endless stars, modern life suddenly feels very far away. Not in a way that feels like loss, in a way that feels like relief. But Mongolia's landscapes change dramatically beyond the steppe. The Gobi Desert. Then comes the Gobi. And suddenly Mongolia feels almost alien. Massive sand dunes rolling into the horizon. Flaming cliffs glowing red at sunset. Hidden ice valleys surviving in the middle of the desert. And silence stretching across the landscape in every direction. The Gobi is one of the largest deserts in the world. But it doesn't feel like one place. It feels like several. Parts of it are dunes. Parts are rocky, open plains. Parts are canyons carved by time into shapes that seem too dramatic to be real. And beneath it all, fossils. Some of the most significant dinosaur discoveries in history were made in the Gobi, which adds another layer to a landscape that already feels ancient. At night, the stars feel impossibly bright, and the emptiness becomes part of the experience. Not a void, not an absence, something else, a presence. The Gobi doesn't feel lifeless. It feels ancient, like something that has always been here and will continue long after everything else changes. Quick question: Would you rather explore Mongolia's endless grasslands or experience the silence of the Gobi Desert? Tell me in the comments. But Mongolia still hides another world entirely. The Altai Mountains and eagle hunters. Far to the west, the Altai Mountains rise above frozen valleys and alpine lakes. And here, ancient traditions still survive. Kazakh eagle hunters ride horseback beneath snow-covered peaks. Golden eagles soar above dramatic cliffs. And villages remain isolated by mountains for much of the year. The relationship between the hunters and the eagles takes years to build. Eagles are captured young, trained carefully, and eventually released back into the wild. It's not a performance for visitors. It's a tradition that predates modern Mongolia by centuries, passed from parent to child, from one generation to the next, through winters that most of the world would find impossible. Everything feels remote, raw, untouched. The kind of place where the distance from everything else isn't a problem to solve. It's the whole point. And suddenly Mongolia becomes something even more extraordinary. Not only a landscape, but a living connection to the past. A place where the ancient and the present exist in the same moment, without tension, without performance. Just continuity. But one of Mongolia's greatest wonders appears after dark: the night sky. In many parts of Mongolia, there is almost no light pollution. Cities are few and far apart. The population density is among the lowest on Earth. And at night, the sky explodes with stars. The Milky Way stretches clearly above the steppe, not as a faint smudge on the edge of the sky, but as something full and visible and directly overhead. A band of light so clear it creates its own soft shadow on the ground below. Meteor showers streak across complete darkness, and silence surrounds everything. The kind of silence that feels total, where there is no background noise, no distant traffic, no hum of anything electrical, just the sound of the land at rest. For many travelers, this becomes the moment they remember most, not because it's dramatic, but because it feels infinite, because it's the kind of experience that recalibrates something, that makes the scale of everything else feel different afterward. And then there's the food shaped by this harsh landscape. Food and culture. Mongolian life has always depended on survival, movement, and resilience. And the food reflects that directly. Meals are simple, filling, and deeply tied to the land. Warm dumplings, slow-cooked meats. Nothing is complicated. Nothing needs to be. The ingredients come from the animals the families raise and the land they move across. It's a food culture built around what sustains you in cold weather, over long distances, through seasons that don't forgive mistakes. And there's something in that simplicity that feels honest. A meal that exists because it works, because it has always worked, because the land demands a certain kind of eating and the culture answered that demand centuries ago. And hospitality remains central to life across the countryside. Travelers are often welcomed into homes by complete strangers, offered food, tea, conversation, without expectation, without transaction, without any of the calculation that surrounds hospitality in most of the modern world, and moments of connection that feel increasingly rare. Not because people are less kind elsewhere, but because in Mongolia, the distances between people make that welcome mean something different. When the nearest neighbor is hours away, and someone arrives at your door, you welcome them. It's as simple and as profound as that. So what makes Mongolia unforgettable? Maybe it's the feeling of space, of silence, of landscapes untouched by modern life, endless grasslands, ancient traditions, frozen mountains, deserts beneath giant skies, a night sky that reminds you how much exists beyond what you can normally see, a hospitality that reminds you how much exists beyond what the modern world has normalized. Mongolia doesn't feel rushed. It feels eternal. And it doesn't ask you to do very much. It doesn't need a packed itinerary. It doesn't reward the traveler who rushes from point to point. It rewards the one who stops, who sits with the silence long enough to stop being uncomfortable in it, who lets the scale of the place actually land. And maybe that's why it stays with people long after they leave, not as a highlight reel, but as a feeling they keep returning to, a reminder of what the world still contains, because Mongolia reminds you how vast the world still is. and how much wildness still remains. Waiting, patient, unchanged. If you enjoyed exploring Mongolia, subscribe for more journeys like this. And tell me, what part of Mongolia would you want to experience first?